Hello, welcome back. Today I'm painting autumn trees in a flower market. You can still enjoy the trees, but you can see that it's not a forest because there's buildings showing through from behind. I'm using a homemade grey. In Nice there's lots of soft coloured buildings, there's sort of earth colours. So I'm just putting in some diluted yellow ochre, going round the street lights, which will show as a contrast because of the white glass, and some of the buildings are pink, so I'm just going to go in with a little bit of Rosemadder. So that's just broken it up a little bit. Moving on to the stalls, which are faded canvas. I'm using Naples yellow, just taking it down as far as I can see, and then the next stall to it has got green and white stripe, so I need a very weak green. So I'm going to mix up some Viridian, and I want a change in tone that I've got lots of warm colours. This is almost faded out, this stall. Been there for a long time. So I'm just putting in the slightest hint of green. I'm just taking it down. I was attracted to the picture, to the fact that all the stalls were very faint. And I'm now going to use some Alizarin crimson and work forward. Again, almost faded out to nothing. Use water to move the paint. And then with the difference in the light and a more shaded area, you can actually begin to see some of the stripes on the nearer stalls. It's just the sun is bouncing off some of the others, and they are very weathered. So I'm now going to get the brush and just pick some of the paint up. Dry the brush again. Just take it off to give it a more faded look. Now they look nice and warm compared to the background. So now I've got the striped stalls. I'm using a rigger, and I've mixed up a bright red with the Alizarin crimson. I've used Scarlet Lake, but any bright red you've got. And just put the stripes in. If you haven't got a rigger, use an ordinary brush that you're happy to hold. The rigger just means that it doesn't need recharging with paint so often. The longer hairs or fibres carry more paint. They are rustling in the wind, so you don't need to worry about them being that perfect. It's just to give the atmosphere of a market. And the ones going down are more definite and less faded. So I'll pop those in. And they're blowing in the wind slightly, so they've got a curved edge. I'll do the same here. I'm starting from the far side. Start where you're comfortable with, but it's just to give the atmosphere of the market. And then get a wider brush, just with water on, nothing else, and then just reduce them slightly on the next canopy to show that it is more faded. And then take the brush that's now got a little bit of pink on, take it further across. Put in some shadows which will give it some shape and form, and just drop it in where there's a gap. So because it's autumn, there's a lot of branches showing, so I'm going to mix up a very dark brown. So I'm starting on the left, just dropping some paint in. There's people in the market as well, so the trees are slightly obscured, but I'm just getting the basic shape of the trunk, making the paint a little bit darker with a burnt sienna and indigo mix. I'm just doing wet into wet. I'll make it slightly darker on the right hand side. I found a nice cafe to sit and sketch this from. If you are doing a crowded scene, you do need somewhere that's not in the way, and you have to allow for people moving while you're doing it. Now I want to make the tree lighter on the left, so I'm just going to add some Naples yellow. Any yellow will do, and it'll send the colours back. And then I need some very distinctive autumn leaves, so I've got chrome orange and a chrome yellow, and I'm just going to put those in as I go so that the branches I've got a lost edge. If I left all the leaves till I'd done all the branches, then they probably... So just working my way across. Let's change the whole tonal balance. And stopping and taking a smaller brush because I've got more delicate branches coming out from another tree. Just taking those to infinity, subdividing as I go. Not too many because the leaves are going to be covering them. So I'll now go back to the bigger brush and I'm going to change the mixture of the orange. We're adding a little bit of sap green because not all the leaves have turned at the same time. And a bit of Viridian. And just some sap green on its own. You will find if you get a row of trees that they haven't necessarily all changed at the same day. And then water again just to lose the edges. So now I'll go to the big tree trunk and go back to the grey mix again. And there's lots of little branches coming out. In France they do tend to heavily prune the trees, so that you find that in England you'd have a huge canopy, but in France you've got a more circular one that's been trimmed to shape. So going back to a smaller brush again, slightly darker colour, and putting in some of the branches that are coming out of the crown of the tree. And again, a darker colour on one side of them to show that there's change in light. And this one has changed earlier, so I'm going to use a little bit of burnt sienna and yellow ochre together and just put on a few crispy leaves that have changed a lot, and then water them down again. The next tree actually starts right over here, so I'll go in with a bigger brush, put the branches in, and they disappear from view under the canopy. A big trunk or a bigger trunk. And then change to a smaller brush and take out the branches. Make it slightly lighter. And they're disappearing all over the place here. And then go back in with more bright colours. More yellow this time, avoiding street lights. You could put latex on the street lights if you're doing anything like this. I'm going to make some of the branches a little bit darker in a minute, but I'm just going in, claiming the space. And then more yellow as it comes towards the middle. I'm going to change to a lemon yellow because I want the picture to lead you in, so I need a lighter centre. And then I'll put some more dark on the tree trunk, which I should have let it perhaps dry a little bit longer. Colours have bled into it slightly, so I'll just put some darker paint on. The joys of painting in autumn, things take longer to dry. And now I can go back with this one and put a few darker colours on as well. I'm using Payne's grey mixed with yellow ochre for just highlighting the bark. And sort of punctuates the other colours. A little bit of water again, just to lose the edges. And then back to the very first one again. It's had a chance to dry. It's always good to do a tree in a couple of layers because you can show more areas of the bark that are different. I've got a black pot, but it's catching the sun from one side. So I'll put in one side. I'm using a flat brush because it's easy to get the straight lines, and turn it on its side to go round the flowers. And then for the other side that's lighter, I'm going to put blue in first. And go back to the first one again. And then the ridge, the rim. And then wash the brush out so it's nearly clean. Pick up a tiny amount of paint and do the lighter side with the second coat. I don't have to do every flower in the market, but just to suggest them. So I start from the bottom, put the point in, just going up. If you do the same angle with the brush, they should look uniform. And I want to make them a little bit more yellow, so I'm going to add some chrome yellow to it. I'll have to wait till it's dry to do the rest, but it's given a suggestion of a bag of tulips. Now the next one, the tulips are far nearer the top, shorter leaves, must be a different variety, and the tulips are more pointed. But moving across, I've got an anemone, so what I can do is put the middle of that in, and I'm starting with the homemade grey, just putting a circle. Just put slightly hint of pink on the edge of the leaves, and get a clean brush, dry it off a little bit and move the paint. That gives harmony now with the red blinds. And then moving to the left while it's all drying, I've got more yellow tulips just sticking out the wrapper. Because they're just sticking out, I'm doing them the other way. I'm starting at the pointy bit just to give a suggestion of them. And behind them I've got pink roses, which I can't do anything about until they've dried. So what I can do is add the people that are in the background. As this is an autumn picture, people are dressed in dark clothes. So I'm going to start with the man's jacket and arm. So I start with his shoulder, work down, and then just move the paint around a little bit. Just get a light shape, and then I can always alter it slightly if I want to. And the cellophane from the flowers is sticking over the rest of him, but I can put his head in. So I'm going to start with skin tone, which in this case is quite light. And just leave that to dry. Now the lady's got jeans on. So in this case, I'll start with her legs to get the colour of the jeans. Little bend for the knee. And then the dark colour again for her coat. But she's wearing a puffer jacket, so it's a bit more bulbous. So again, I'll start from her shoulder, go down. And then she's got a hood. So I won't put in the body of the hood, I'll just put in the, leave a gap for it at the moment. And then take it out a little bit at the front. Now I'll go back with a darker colour for the hood. I'll just use Payne's grey. And he's got an arm going across. And then the rest of his jacket goes down. And then the rest is behind the cellophane. So what I'm going to do is treat cellophane like water. Just make more of a lighter, vaguer shape. And there's hardly any of her face showing. I'll just stick a little peek in. So I've just mixed a little bit of purple that was on the palette in. It's always worth leaving things on your palette. Don't clean it too much. It's all useful. I'll give his leg a better shape around the plants. And again, he's got a very long coat on. Now the lady's hair, I need a different colour. She's actually, in my sketch, got quite black hair, but I don't want any more black there, and I don't want her to match the tree, so I'm going to put in yellow ochre for the hair colour, just so that she shows out, and I'll do the same for him as well. Having given the tulips a chance to dry, I'm now going to put some more leaves in, and I've added the wrappers underneath. So I've got the green that's been tinted with a lot of yellow, but the tulips are yellow, so I need it to be a slightly different shade. So I'm just going to add a tiny bit French ultramarine to one side of my mix in the palette, and the other side I'm going to leave light and do sweeps and then join them. So it's 3 strokes. So it's from one side or the other, and then a line up the middle. Varying the colour slightly as I go. Now also I've got to be careful that the picture doesn't become dark, because it is an autumn picture. So the trees are quite dark, and some of the containers are dark, and the people are wearing dark clothes. So I've got to be mindful of that. So I'll just put smaller strokes in this other bag of flowers because it's further away. So being mindful of the tones, I'm going to add a little bit of turquoise to the blue. Just make the bags a little bit brighter. And the reason that they've got gaps in is there's lots of advertising there, which was too complicated. It just spoilt the picture, and also it was taking ages to draw. And then to lighten up the grey bag, just going to add a little bit of Naples yellow in one area, so it's catching some sun, and just feather that out a bit. So now it's time, I think, to put the street lights in, which will add more contrast. And they've got almost copper tops. So I'm mixing some burnt sienna with yellow ochre. And then they've got more bronzy bottoms. So I'll just put in a straight line and a line through the light. And then put in the top pieces, concave triangle. But the same with the ones over here. Let's put in the base first, and then a line up through the white glass. The top, concave triangle. Can add any frilly bits in a minute. Make it slightly darker, because it's under more trees. And then they've got a little decoration on top. So I'm just going to use slightly darker paint to put a little suggestion of a decoration on top. And then there's decoration all the way around, so I'll just put that in as spikes. And I'm just going to get a flat brush and just take the lines back a little bit thinner. There's a barest suggestion of them. So I'm mixing the yellows and oranges and greens together just to give variety around the lamp. And the same over here, just green leaves. Just make the light more dominant. And these flowers are in cellophane. They look like anemones again, but they're a bit squished. But they have got dark red middles. So we'll start with some Azilian crimson and put it where I can see anything. It's quite strong. Just a little bit every now and again. I want to make that stronger still if I can. And then the rest of them are pink, so I'm going to go back to the Rosemadder for a difference. Just a slight different shade. And then there's green leaves. Some of the cellophane goes over the trees, but I want to make them as bright as possible now they've had a chance to dry. So I'm using lemon yellow, just dropping in some colours, and then to make it look more autumny, some orange, which is chrome orange. Just putting wet into wet. And then losing the edges. It just gives an autumn glow. I'll do the same on the other side so that I've got symmetry, and then I'll make a punch area visually in the middle. Go around the stall covering. And again, a little bit of orange away from the red. I don't want to have colours competing. That looks nice and autumny. And then at the bottom, it's just really the buildings in the background that are showing. So I'm going to use some slightly dirty yellow ochre. Just go down so that there's a difference. Let's try and get a clean line against the canopy. And by making a definite line up to the canopy, shows it more. And moving into the middle, I want to give an area of punch, so I'm going to add a little bit of sap green to the lemon yellow. Just going to do a different colour again and add some yellow ochre this time, slightly further away, catching the light differently. Now these flowers are squished in cellophane, but you can still see definite areas. So what I'm going to do is mix up slightly darker green, because the light you're looking at through the cellophane, it just changes the colour slightly. So I'm just going to put in some stems and leaves. I'll just put in a few little stalks. It separates the greenery and the shape and form of the flowers. So now moving down to the next area, which seems to be roses, and they are quite interesting from a painting point of view. I'm going to use Azilian Crimson. They've got a darker edge. So to start with, I'm going to put the edges in Azilian Crimson. Any petals that I can see. And then before they're dried, clean a brush and just pull them down so that it gives a graduated edge. I've just mixed up a darker green. All recipes are in the description, but you just have to use your judgment, and putting in some of the rose leaves. And the main thing is that they're pointed and they've got a slight curl. So do the edges and then infill the middle. And they're quite in shade in this position. You don't have to put too many in, just to give a hint that they're real flowers. Second dab of paint, just to add a little bit of shape and form, and then losing any hard edges. Cellophane, I just usually make it look like water that's just slightly blurred. And I've got some other flowers in the background. Next bucket. It's giving the picture more depth. Now, having put those in, the yellow looks a little bit pale, so I'm just going to give the yellow a second coat in places. When you're painting a picture, often certain areas have a second coat just to give it a bit more punch, because one colour can affect the colour value of a nearby one. So now moving across to the anemones, which I had to let dry, and it's got little dots in the middle, so I'm using a smaller brush. Find a number 1 brush and some purple paint. Any purple will do. And just on top of the area that I made that was grey, just put little dots. And then a few more around, and it's got a circle that's quite evident in it, so I'll put that in. Now, out of the others in the bucket, there's hardly any other centres showing, but I can just put in a suggestion. And then I've got more greenery, slightly lighter than the roses. Amazing how many different greens you get in a flower display. And then I've got roses in cellophane again, so they're all standing upright, and I've got tulips that I can put in with much weaker paint. So I'm just almost using green water. I'm just putting in a suggestion. Entirely different tulips. And then every now and again one that's more definite, just to give the idea. And they are pink and white, so I'm going to use Rosemadder this time just to be different. And it's a little bit yellow, so I'm just going to mix a tiny bit of any yellow with it just to take the edge off. And then they're more pink at the bottom, so just do one side and then the other. Now recharge the brush, but not too much. One side and the other. So I'll go back to the bigger brush and the Azilian Crimson. And just put the edges in and then take them down with the water, as I did with the other bucket of flowers. A little bit stronger to give variety. Recharge the brush and then just drop it in to the wet paint. Clean the brush off and then just pull it down a little bit. I'm just working my way around now, putting on a few more things. I've given the yellow tulips a second coat of paint and some of the pink ones just to balance the picture front to back. And I've now got some tulips that have got a lot of protection on, so I'm just going in with sap green with a little bit of yellow mixed, just showing them standing up on display. Every now and again you get a hint of a leaf showing through. And then lots more green shoots. So just put a few lines in where there's some overlapping each other. It's all sort of indistinct. And those tulips are almost white, but I'm going to separate them from the white paper by using a tiny bit of Naples yellow. So I'll put it in at the top first, and then using the dry brush to pull it down. And there's some shading, so I'll just give a slight line. Now the next thing I've got while they're drying is some more very pale pink ones here with a almost white edge. So I'm putting those in with a line. Each one has a line. Clean the brush off and just pull it out a little bit. It may be that because this is an autumn picture that these are the varieties that do best at this time of year. And then there's some dark green packaging or possibly leaves, but it separates it from the white paper it's wrapped up in. Now I've got a lot of the cellophane showing, and a good way to do cellophane is to treat it like water. So I'm just putting a tiny bit of blue paint on the brush, and I'll start over here and then just bring it down as though it is water and it's just reflecting the light. And then in other places is things that are behind that are showing, so I'm changing to yellow ochre. I'm just going to put some on, and again just bring it down just to show that there's something there, and blue together because there's reflections of the stalls opposite. Just put it in and let the water do the work. Now some of these tulips are actually in mesh, but I think we use the same principle. Put it in, bit of blue, pull it back down to a line. Now whilst that's drying, I can put some of the things in on the stalls opposite that seem to have a lot of blue plastic crates, but it's more interesting than that because it's catching the light. So adding more blue, going in diagonally where it's not in the sunshine. And act as a foil for the flowers. And then further into the rafters is warm because the sun is catching it. So I'll put Naples yellow in and bring it down to a more shady area. And again on this side, slightly brighter in places. And there's a few areas here where the sun's just finding its way through. And then the far stalls have got reflections of green stripes, so the light is quite different. It's just a question of getting the warm against the cool. I'm just going to use a damp brush just to take some of that back a little bit. And then in the middle we've got more cellophane that's causing an odd view and you can't see all the way through. Just puts a different light on it. I was using grey from the palette to do that. And it goes all the way up into the trees. It's adding some water, because I don't want it to be too dominant. And then more cellophane over the man, which is why I've left him slightly lighter one side. But I'm going to add some blue just for variety. And put in another lot of cellophane. Take the blue into the other bits as well. And there's quite a different line at the bottom of the cellophane on the right. It's picking up more light. Where it's folded over, just catching the light differently. And I've got all sorts of colours creeping in from other nearby stores. So just let that down a bit. And then more dark shadows of people just moving around. And because of the time of year, they all seem to be in dark colours. So I put in a torso, then a head, then an arm. I'll move back to the interior of this stall, which has got quite a warm blue showing through it. So I'm going to add some turquoise to the French ultramarine and just put that in as a gentle highlight. That's a colour we haven't got anywhere else. Just returning now to put a little bit more detail on some of the market stalls. It's important for a picture that you're able to look through it and it goes to a focal point. And then I've got some equipment that can go in, so I'm going to change brushes because I've got lots of straight lines. I'll just go back to make it solid. And then it's got sort of semi-curved top. I'll make that a bit stronger as it's under the canvas, so it's not getting quite so much light. And there's a few supports for all this canvas, so I've got some straight lines to go in, and they disappear under the canopy, and then more supports. So I'll just put one in for now. It gives the idea that it's a stool, and the rest of them are just striped again. So I've got turquoise and French ultramarine, just mix them together. These might be just crates. Obviously, if you're trading at a market, everything's got to be delivered somehow, but it just breaks up the picture. And then in the background, we've just got different areas that are catching different amounts of light. So I'm just going to put in some sideways strokes. That's enough to give a change to all the other things that are going vertically. Now, whilst I'm here, I'm going to make the black bucket a bit darker. But I don't want it to be a barrier. You've still got to be able to get into the picture. I don't want the other side to be the same because that's catching the light. So I'm going to add a little bit of purple to the mix, which will just make it a bit warmer. And it won't clash with all the pinks in the flowers. So that's separated the two nicely. Now the man with the cellophane half across him, he needs defining a bit more. So start with, there was an area of yellow next to him, so I'll pop that in. And then the cellophane starts to come out. Now the cellophane needs separating a little bit, so you can either put a dark line or a light line. So I've got a flat brush, go along, take some of the paint off a little bit. Use a tissue or kitchen roll, just dab it, and it'll leave a highlight. And the same here where it's rolled over a bit. It's got bent somehow. And on the bottom there's a very distinct white line, and the only way I'm going to get that to show is to put something very dark next to it. So I'll make the light line first, dab off the top. And on the other side, both sides are catching the light. So two white lines. And at the bottom it's quite crunched. So I'll just go up and down a little bit. And again, a good way to make it more obvious is to make the flowers next to the line a little bit darker. So I'll just put a tiny bit more paint on some of these. They are indistinct because they're squished into the packaging, so that shows up a lot more now. So the you need a dark line under this one. I've got several dark things behind it, so I'll just put 2 dark areas in, and then a cream area just to separate it and lift the warmth. And then just get a clean brush and just lose the edges. Now the posts in the market are white, but they've got darker surroundings, so again using the grey, lifting it a little bit with some yellow ochre and just going down one side of the post and then down the other side. I'm going to keep the middle of the picture light, and anything else I could just make a little darker. I don't want it too dark, so I'm going to change to blue. Just bring it down a bit. The market's so crowded you can't be sure of anything, you just have to suggest. And I'll just sponge that back a little bit again. That shows that there's something happening in that corner. Now, finishing off on the right, I've got a couple of people talking to each other. So I'm going to put in their faces first. It's really only one face showing. So I've already got pink on the go for the flowers, so I'll use the same pink for the lady. This one you can't really see much at all, but I'll stick something in. And then to highlight it, I'm just going to stick a tiny bit of just the Naples yellow, or any yellow you've got on her forehead, and just water it down to give a highlight so the sun's catching that area. And I'm going to put the lady with her back to me in with very dark brown hair, because it's a colour I haven't used yet. So I'm going to start from her parting and then take it down, and then I'll drop other colours in just to highlight it. And she's got very long hair. Make it a little bit wispy. And you get a small brush, some stronger brown, and just put in a few lines from the parting again, and then a couple of wispy bits at the front. And the lady she's talking to has got grey hair, but that'll get a bit lost in this picture, so I think I'll give her darker hair. I'll mix some Payne's grey with the brown and just go from the parting again. And then get a wet brush and just lose some of the edges. Now the jacket, she got another one with a black jacket. I don't think I'm going to make it Payne's grey. So to start with, we've got a collar sticking out. Just put collar in, take the jacket down, and I've got a sleeve that's catching the light one side, and her hair is merging with the jacket, which is quite nice because I can do strokes that go into both. Her other shoulder, I know it's a small brush, but I want to just get the sun shining on the jacket, leaving a few white lines for the sun shining on the waterproof fabric. Now I'm going to reduce the paint on the brush, and it's got a highlight here of sun and on top of the collar. So it's one person. Now the other person, you can see some of her coat. She's got a red blouse and a purple cardigan, so I don't want them to clash, so I'm just going to put the red in, and then I've already got some purple, so I'll mix it with a red so that they're more in keeping with each other. And then a little bit on this side, just suggesting it. Sort out the packaging for the tulips. Now they're in mesh, so I'm just going to put some lines down, crisscross, and it'll act like a foil for them, bringing them more into focus. And this packaging goes all over the flowers, but I don't really want to suggest it that much. I'm just going to give a hint, but it does put your focus on the flower. And then they're in white bags, so I can't show the white really, I could just show the edges. So again, just take it down, clean brush. And they're in shadow from each other. Just separating the space really. Little V's to show the shadows there. You can go on forever when you're painting a flower market, but you have to decide on the level of detail that you want to show. And lastly, the lampstands. I've got the lamps in, but the lampstands are showing in some places. So I will just go down. Everyone is different. And they've all got embellishments on. They're all complicated. So just take the brush for a walk. It's not a straight line at all. There's little extras. Some of them are showing quite green. So I'm going to add some Viridian just to one side. And then a little yellowy line for the division in the glass. And a few leaves over them, so you can't see it all, you can just see some of it. And then there's a shadow down the pole here, which is obviously the drawstring as well. I'm just going to get the flat brush again. These lights are very ornate and they're catching the sun in certain places, so I'm just going to lift some of the paint off just gently, and then just dab it with the tissue. So there you have a market. Now you could go on and put some eyebrows on the lady, which we can do, just to break up her face a little bit. But you really don't want to get involved in too much detail. It's a picture of the flower market. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed watching this video and that you'll try painting the autumn colours yourself. And any market, whether it's selling hats or shoes or anything, is always good subject matter, but try and find somewhere to sit. I sat at a cafe to do this. Thank you very much for watching.